Jesus is present to us in many different ways in the world. He's present to us in the scriptures. He's present to us when 2 or 3 are gathered in his name. He's present to us in the poor and the vulnerable. But he's present most especially in the Eucharist. The Eucharist is the body, blood, soul, and divinity of Jesus Christ. It may look like bread and wine to us. It may smell like bread and wine. It may taste like bread and wine. But after an ordained priest prays the words of institution over the bread and wine, that bread and wine is no longer there. But those words of institution, this is my body, this is my blood, the Holy Spirit descends upon those gifts and they substantially change into the body and blood, soul and divinity of Jesus Christ. This is what Christ teaches at the Last Supper when he says, this is my body and this is my blood. And he taught it very clearly at a synagogue in Capernaum. We find the story in John 6. When Jesus is preaching to the crowds, he begins to teach them this Eucharistic theology. And he speaks about eating his flesh, that he is the living bread come down from heaven. And the crowds start to murmur, and they start to talk amongst themselves, because how can he be living bread? And you would think, as a good teacher, if the crowds misunderstood him, he would correct them, right? Any good teacher in a classroom, if the entire class is misunderstanding what you're saying, you're going to start correcting the misconception. But what does Jesus do? Jesus doubles down, and he repeats himself again and again. If you read the 6th chapter of John, he says it repeatedly. I am the living bread. Anyone who eats my flesh and drinks my blood has life in them. He even intensifies his language as the crowds misunderstand and get confused and get uncomfortable by this teaching. He simply intensifies his language. And we know this because the Apostle John changes the Greek word from phago, which simply means to eat, to trogo, which means to gnaw, to chew like an animal. This is intense language that if people are already off-put by this teaching, changing this, intensifying your language is not going to help. In fact, we see the crowds walk away. It gets to the point where it's not just the crowds walking away, it's Jesus' disciples walking away. These men who had been following him, these women and these children, are uncomfortable. Because as John tells us, it's a hard saying. And so they walk away. And what does the good teacher do? Does he clear up their misconception? No, because it wasn't a misconception. They understood what he was saying. And he turns to his apostles and says, are you going to leave me too? And Peter has that great act of faith that we don't really understand it either, but we're staying. We are asked that as well as Catholics. It's a hard saying. Do we really believe that the bread and wine change into the body, blood, soul, and divinity of Jesus Christ? That it's not just a symbol, that it's not somehow Jesus present in the bread, but that bread and wine are no longer there. And when we approach the altar, we are receiving Jesus Christ. It's why we don't receive communion when we're conscious of mortal sin on our souls. It's why we make an act of reverence before we approach the priest or the extraordinary minister, because we're approaching Jesus Christ. And that makes all the difference in the world. And that's a little theology in 3 minutes. Hey friends, thanks for watching. If you like Theology in 3, please like, subscribe, and share. And leave your feedback in the comments because I would love to dialogue with you. There is a lot more content coming. God bless.